myself up again.
All right, everybody, it's 1:31. So we will reconvene. If everybody can come to the table and move conversations outside, we will resume the ISFMP Policy Board. What's next?
Marin is going to just give us an update on the...
Marin is going to update us on the River Herring Technical Expert Working Group progress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is just an update on the progress of the River Herring Technical Expert Working Group, which, as Tony mentioned, is also known as the TUG. And so I just wanted to provide you guys a little bit of background first. If you'll recall, back in 2013, river herring was found to be not warranted under the Endangered Species Act. And so NOAA Fisheries and the Commission are coming together to develop and implement a conservation plan for river herring. And NOAA Fisheries has provided the Commission with $95,000 and plans to supplement this with an additional $200,000. And basically what we're trying to do is fill in data gaps in the listing determination before the status review, which will occur in about 5 years. So again, the TUG was formed to provide individual expert opinions to the Commission and NOAA Fisheries to aid in the development of this plan. And the reason we say individual expert opinions is because under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, the TUG cannot make consensus recommendations. So we document, the ideas and thoughts of the members on the TUG. And there are about 80 people on the TUG, and they're composed of members. It's composed of members from state agencies, the industry, the recreational fishing industry, government representatives, and members of NGOs. So basically what will happen is NOAA Fisheries and the Commission will consider TUG input when formulating the request for research proposals, and the priorities may be based on the expert opinions that are obtained from the TUG. And they will also be based on public comment and science and management needs. And those research projects that will be funded will contribute to that river herring conservation plan that NOAA Fisheries is developing. And so just a little bit more about the structure of the TUG. What we've done is we've split those 80 people into 6 different subgroups and then a committee that we're calling the Ecosystem Integration Committee. The first subgroup is the Climate Change subgroup, and that subgroup will be focusing on topics directly related to climate change. And so just up to now so far in the process, the data gaps that they've identified are that the amount of available river herring spawning habitat, and they would like some more information on the impacts of the stream flow on passage and the interactions with barriers. The stock status subgroup is focusing on the modeling approaches for river herring, and they're working to identify the data needs for future assessments and for the listing determination. The habitat subgroup is the largest subgroup. It also has the widest scope. And they're developing a spreadsheet which will hopefully focus their efforts on habitat research to date and determine where there are gaps in monitoring. And the fisheries subgroup is focusing on the strengths and weaknesses of catch estimates and looking at how management actions that have been implemented could influence those catch numbers. The species interaction subgroup is focusing on predator-prey relationships, and they're trying to determine the predation pressure on different life stages of alewives and how predation impacts natural mortality in different regions along the coast. The genetics subgroup has discussed utilizing molecular marker techniques that were used on the West Coast for Pacific salmon. And they're trying to determine a good way to standardize genetic techniques on the East Coast, to ensure that any samples taken are, comparable to other samples from different laboratories. And finally, the Ecosystem Integration Committee is an overarching committee which is composed of the chairs and chairs and co-chairs, of each of the subgroups, and they're working to ensure an integrated approach is taken and that topics that cross subgroups are addressed from a holistic view. And just finally, the next steps, we have another call on September 3rd, and as I mentioned, the Commission and NOAA Fisheries will be releasing a request for proposal sometime this fall. Thank you.
Questions for Marin? Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marin, which federal program served as the source of funding for this? You referenced $295,000, I believe, total committed from NOAA Fisheries. Which NOAA program is that they drew those funds from? Thank you.
I don't know, but I will find out and get back to you.
Anything else from Marin? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the report. I had a question. Since we obviously can't regulate much of the habitat of this species, is the group going to come up with be able to identify or come up with some recommendations about how to address issues with the states or those folks who may control dams or other habitat areas that obviously have the most impact on the species' success?
Yes, the habitat subgroup, they are, as I mentioned, they're the largest subgroup, so they're kind of getting things together currently, but they've mentioned that barriers to passage are one of the largest threats that they're going to focus on and hopefully determine some good solutions.
Bob, I think I can answer your question. It's from the GARFO office, the Greater Atlantic.
Anything else on the TUG? Seeing none, thank you. Next up is discussion of collaboration with Great Lakes Fisheries Commission on American eel management. And Tony, would you handle that for us?
I would be my pleasure. Thank you, Lewis. Some of you were members of the Commission back in 2008-2009 when we had started to work with the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission on an MOU on eel management, and we had a draft. The Commission had signed it, and then we sort of lost steam from the other side of our partnership. And a couple weeks ago, Bob and I met with staff from the Great Lakes Commission, and we'd like to move forward with collaboration with the Great Lakes, and that may or may not entail developing another MOU, but at least starting to collaborate with them on science and then possibly discussing different types of management that could help coordinate how we move forward with eels. And so just looking for direction if that's something that the Policy Board is interested in having staff start to collaborate with the Great Lakes.
Is there any objection to that? Seems like a good opportunity. Seeing none, let's move on it. Last item on our agenda for Policy Board is the Atlantic Coast Fish Habitat Partnership Report. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick funding updates for the Atlantic Coastal Fish Habitat Partnership. In 2013, the partnership solicited applications for on-the-ground habitat conservation projects. The partnership received 18 applications and submitted a ranked list to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Fish and Wildlife recently announced all fish habitat partnership projects nationally that were approved for FY14 funding. 2 project applications submitted to ACFIP were approved to receive funding. The first, an oyster reef and salt marsh habitat restoration project in Stump Sound, North Carolina, which is about 20 miles northeast of Wilmington. Red drum, spotted sea trout, weakfish, spot croaker, and shrimp will benefit from the restored and protected salt marsh and oyster habitat. The second project is a barrier removal in West Conch Creek, New Jersey, which is a tributary to Barnegat Bay. This project will restore access to over 13 kilometers of stream habitat for river herring, eel, and other diagamous species. Moving on to the FY15 project funding opportunity. Again, the Fish and Wildlife Service and ACFIP are requesting project applications to restore and conserve habitat for coastal, estuary-independent, and diagamous species. Federal funding available to the partnership through Fish and Wildlife will be used to support the top-ranked proposals. The maximum amount of available funds for individual projects is $50,000. Funds can be used for on-the-ground habitat conservation and improvement, as well as related design and monitoring activities. And the number of projects funded will be dependent on the amount requested and funding availability. Also wanted to highlight that applications must be received by Friday, September 26, a couple months from now. And for more information on the proposal submission guidelines, visit the partnership website, atlanticfishhabitat.org. Finally, you may have noticed that I am not Emily Green, the longtime coordinator for the Atlantic Fish Habitat Partnership. Emily took a new job with NOAA's Office of Habitat Protection back in April. The partnership has hired a new coordinator, Lisa Havel, who will start in September. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Pat. Good report. Questions for Pat? Off the hook, man. Thank you. That concludes all the agended items for the Policy Board. Is there any other business to come before the Policy Board? If not, what I'd like to do is, I think, go straight into